Welcome to College Football Roundtable, your source for college football coverage, including major storylines,
playoffs,
can't miss game previews, and picks each week. Join your hosts, Dan, Rob, and Jordan at the Roundtable for a show unlike anything else. As for Football presents the College Football Roundtable.
Welcome back, everybody. Texas Tech, Crabtree, Texas. Middle Tennessee beats Miami by 2 scores, and those damn Kansas State Wildcats beat Oklahoma. The strap season is getting crazy. I don't know if you're playing along with us, but if you are playing along with us for the Cruiserweight title, which Dan is holding in his hot little hand, it has been bonkers. So the spread, I think, is like 13 now. So we've got a lot of people moving up and down. I've been breaking even about 50%. I was actually 1-1-1 this week, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Welcome back, Trash Talkers, to the College Football Roundtable, or 2 O's and an NCO, or Ring Knock Radio, whichever you prefer. I'm your host, Rob. I am in Vietnam, and I keep being told not to say that, but I will continue to say it because All-American Week was this week, and there's a lot of excitement during the division run. You know, if you've never done it
with you.
Yeah, if you've never done a division run in the 82nd, you know, they take the AA seriously, and there are beers being thrown at the division formation as the soldiers run by. Anyway,
what brotherly rivalry is until you've been in one of those. They make us all wear t-shirts because we want to know what gang we belong to, but it's nothing but a nonstop airborne shuffle of trash talk between different colored battalion shirts for about, I don't know, what, 2 hours there coming around?
Yeah, it's like 2.5 hours, and the only thing cool is you get buzzed by Apaches and CH-47s, but like that gets old after like the first mile.
I think
anyway,
Smith champ is here from the movie Ali, nonstop for 2 hours. That's all I did. That was my job.
Nice. Oh, that's got to be uncomfortable. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So anyway, I'm Rob, your host in Vietnam. We got Dano Ikebesa in coastal Connecticut, and we've got Trigger Joe coming out of the home of the big house. How's it going today, guys?
Good, man. I went over to my buddy Bill's this weekend, and it was fun as anything, and we watched a lot of football, but that dude is a bad influence on me. I barely remember any of the football that we watched, so I'm going to endeavor to be intelligent, but, a lot of it is quite a blur. An ugly blur at that.
Well, they say
as Mondays go, it's been pretty normal, but so there's that.
Yeah, but as they say, and Joe, what do you got going on? How you doing today?
Oh, I was, I'm blurting apparently. That's one issue I always have. But no, I was gonna say it's like your garden variety Monday. The only problem is it's Wednesday.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds about right for everybody. So, I mean, good part of it is like we're a little bit further north. So if you are University of Miami, not only did you take a licking this weekend, but now you've got the eye of a hurricane sitting on top of you. But other than that, I'm doing pretty well. Yes, it is Wednesday. I will tell you, if you are not listening to the Army Football Show, you should probably check it out. We had a really good one this week. We talked about the quarterbacks and Mikey Stadium, and still, to me now, it makes me think about how long are we going to see, like these 26, 27-year-old dudes that had a COVID year and double, extra eligibility and all this other stuff. Because there's some grown men playing college football right now that have switched programs, and it's starting to show.
Yeah.
But without further ado, we'll pass it over to Dan for the rundown of the top 10.
Yeah, so the top 10, not super changed. Georgia, number 1. Alabama sits at number 2, Ohio State number 3, Michigan number 4. I think this is probably your top 4 until these guys play each other. Number 5 is Clemson. They sort of squeaked in there past Wake Forest just barely. Number 6, Southern California moves up 1. Number 7, Kentucky, they also move up 1. Number 8, Tennessee, they also move up 1. Man, it is hard to believe that they're sitting at number 8, but pretty convincing win against Florida. Number 9, Oklahoma State. They've got NC State, I think, this weekend. And number 10 is NC State. So somebody's going down. Other notables, you got number 13, Oregon. They look good. Number 18, you've got Oklahoma, Alabama, Oklahoma. I don't know what that is, Oklahoma. But anyway, Oklahoma. Number 20, Arkansas. Number 25, K-State. They sneak into the top 25. And second week in a row, no group of 5 teams, which is crazy because you got group of 5 teams beating Power 5 teams all over the place. Speaking of which, others receiving votes, you got Florida State with 85. They probably could stand and get a couple more. App State with 77. They may very well be the best in the group of 5. Cincinnati with 52. Kansas with 23. How they're not ranked, I don't know. And finally, Syracuse with number 7.
Yeah, I think there's a huge problem, particularly with K-State and Duke or Kansas and Duke this weekend. That's usually a basketball contest, but again, it was a great game. I mean, I think they have to start giving a little tip of the hat to Kansas. I mean, you have to.
Yeah, no, we touched on that.
Yeah, we talked about that last week. Hey, guess what? They showed up.
If they handle Duke,
yeah,
and they win convincingly, it doesn't have to be a blowout, but if they handle Duke, then I think they should be ranked. I still think they're being underlooked. And boy, you and I called it last week. Said, I think people are they're paying the rent for their past 10 years.
Yeah,
and that's all.
Absolutely.
That's kind of why App State was, came into the big house that year with all that talent, and virtually nobody gave them a shot. And it was like, okay, well, you go talent for talent. Doesn't matter when you're getting smacked in the mouth what helmet you got on. And K-State or Kansas, they got some talent. I mean, it took them a while, but I believe they are for real top 25 team.
Well, and I wonder how much NIL has to do with it, right? Because Kansas is a recognizable school based off of basketball, right? So you're going to see the evolution of college football change just because people are going to come to those schools because, hey, I know that there's a television contract for basketball, but if the eyes are on it and the program is doing well, that gives me a better chance to move on to the pros. But who knows? I mean, there's the fact that App State's not in the top 25 is kind of a shame too, because they've showed up. Yes, they have one loss, but guess what? There's going to be people in the top 25 with one loss that aren't playing as well as App State is. So I think App State is for real. We'll see how the rest of their season goes, but I think Kansas not being ranked, I think that's just some penance for some previous crimes that they're trying to work off. But moving into Service Academy football, Navy eked out a win at East Carolina. I watched that game. It was gross. Every time I watch Ken Niumatalolo's face when their kicker kicks a field goal, he's shocked that they're winning. And that's just a scathing indictment on the program, man. Like them or hate them, it's Navy. We don't want to see them win, but we also, I just get tired of seeing that look on Ken's face, man. Like he's shocked, like, oh my gosh, we actually won this football game. Like it was that bad. Like I was watching it double overtime and you're just like, dude, like coach your team better, right? Like put them in a position where they can win. Yeah. Air Force smoked Nevada. And I don't think that's anything else, but they have an alumni that's kind of pissed off everybody in football. So if Nevada continues to lose, I don't care. And Army is coming off a bye week going into Georgia State. Or Georgia State's coming up to Mikey Stadium. We did a really good deep dive on the Army football show, but I definitely think that's a contest to watch because, again, it's going to be, skill on skill. Is their quarterback better than our defense? And I think that's going to be a great game to watch. But I also think Troy Calhoun needs to take that freaking Nebraska job sooner rather than later because Air Force needs a distraction because they're pretty much rolling. I think they kind of slipped on the banana peel against Wyoming, but after the drubbing that they put on Nevada, I think they kind of got it back on target.
I think they're legit and Wyoming's underrated.
Wyoming does look underrated. That's true. They got a big game this weekend too. I forget who they're playing.
I think Air Force is a problem.
Well, we'll see this weekend, right? You got Navy going up to Air Force, and Navy's defense looks good, but their offense has just been dreadful. And I don't think that they've convinced me of anything because they beat East Carolina, even though obviously they had to score some points there. But let's talk about this next week.
Yeah, but it was 23 points in overtime. Like it was not, it wasn't like they were impressive. They had one really long pass over the top, and their fullbacks looked okay-ish. But again, they put the ball on the turf. I think it was like 3 times. So again, when it comes to the turnover battle, as aggressive as Air Force's defense is, I don't know. I think Navy might be taking a whooping, particularly at Mile High Stadium. But we'll pass it over to Dan for the Commander Trophy status
Well, yeah, like I said, we'll come back to this next week. You got the first big game with Navy going to Air Force. I tend to agree that Air Force definitely comes in with the rub, if you want, but who knows? I think Coach Ken knows he's got his job on the line this year. He tends to be very good in those high pressure situations, and it just is what it is, right? On the FCS side, you got Coast Guard Academy is now 2-2, having lost to Anna Maria this past weekend. They have a coming challenge against Norwich this week. And you've also got the Merchant Marine Academy sitting at 2-1. They beat Keene College 9-7. That's a baseball score this past weekend. They take on Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Rob, you got a note in here. The school formerly known as Worcester County Free Institute of Industrial Science. Is that real?
Yeah, that's real. But that was like 1886. Like when I looked it up, because I was like, WPI, like what the hell? So when I looked it up, that was the original name for the school, like when it was first founded. So I found that humorous. But let's talk about Joe's Blue Falcon of the week. So what are your thoughts? Because there's a lot of shenanigans that happened this weekend, and somebody that pulled defeat from the jaws of victory, or what are your thoughts?
I battled over this, whether it was the ASU coaching staff that leaked information to get Herm Edwards fired. I think that's about as Blue Falcon a move as you get.
Yeah.
I don't have a name to assign that to, but it honestly, it was kind of nauseating. Like, man, because I respect Herm Edwards. I think he's a solid football mind, a solid football coach. And I was just like, whoever did that put the state of ASU football as to where it is. Dude, you're definitely the Blue Falcon. And for generations. And this cover on the chair isn't a joke. I did go 0-3. So if you bet with me, I'm the Blue Falcon blame myself. But every team that I bet on did win money line, but we don't pick money line games here. That's for CrossFit and people who got a lot of soy in their diet. Men pick the spread, and I lost against the spread. So I'm wearing a share of the Blue Falcon blame. I may not have the color on, but the shame is there, fellas. Michigan definitely looked what I was worried about, like they have a freshman quarterback.
Yeah. I don't know. I watched that game and they seemed out of sorts, and I don't know why.
Offense,
right? And I don't know why. The defense looked good, and I think that's just a trend that we're seeing this season. And one of the things that we talked about on the Army show is when you look at these teams, the number of plays that they're having on defense. And that's one of those statistics that's not really tracked. Like we don't talk about it. It's part of team defense, but when you look at the teams that are doing well, they have under 150 plays on defense in 4 games. And the teams that are kind of struggling are over 200. And so it's a pretty telling statistic, but it's just like the game within the game. If you're not paying attention to those type of things, it hurts. And I can tell you, Michigan, again, pretty stout defense, but like it's Maryland, dude. Like that shouldn't have happened. And, watching Big Ten football, that's just one of those. Yeah.
Yeah, they were getting pulled off the ball.
Yeah, it was just one of those things that's not supposed to happen. But
that against Maryland.
Yeah.
But I will say this, Maryland, hey, look, watch Maryland the rest of the year.
Yeah.
That wasn't a fluke. And I'll tell you this, Michigan won by 7, and they got every single break in the game.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you also got to think you've got you got Tua's brother is their starting quarterback, so that there's some talent in that gene pool that runs pretty deep.
After that turnover and got a couple of triggered Joe texts right back, like.
Yeah. Joe is not in a good mood. It's pretty funny. Anyway, moving on to games of the week. Thursday. Hey, like I'm starting to dig the Thursday, Friday schedule in college football because it's like there's really nothing else on, and I'm not a big pro football fan, so it's nice to be able to tune in to something on the television that not is essentially super boring pro football in my opinion. Anyway. Thursday night, you got Utah State and BYU. That's a little bit of a late kick for a primetime game, and that's just because they're closer to the West Coast than they are to the East. So that's 8 o'clock on ESPN. Friday on September the 30th, you got Tulane and Houston. That should be a decent game. And UTSA and MTSU actually will probably be a good one, just based off of the way that those guys played last week. And it like MTSU came out of nowhere and smacking people around. So I think that's going to be a great game. And the best part about the MTSU game is they beat Miami on Mario Cristobal's birthday. So, how about that birthday present for you, losing by 2 touchdowns on national television?
Man.
Yeah. So that was interesting. You got San Diego State and Boise State at 8, Washington and UCLA if you want to stay up, and New Mexico and UNLV. UNLV, again, one of those basketball schools from the 90s, but it may turn around with NIL stuff. All right, Saturday, this is where all the action happens. So you got Georgia State and Army kicking at noon on CBS Sports Network. And if you're conflicted, make sure you have a different separate setup. If you want to watch Navy and Air Force go at it, they're at Air Force, so they're going to be at altitude playing against the Falcons.
I did not realize that was going head to head with the Army game. That's a programming choice.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of, I don't know. Again, there's a lot of fratricide between ESPN, ABC, and now CBS is doing it. But you got number 4 Michigan against Iowa. That's usually a good game just because the Hawkeyes are a lot tougher than people give them credit for. You'll blink and they'll be 8-0. And you won't even realize it. Then you're like, oh, they're playing for the conference championship. Like, oh, their division championship. Holy moly. You got Kentucky and Ole Miss. That should be a good game. That's noon on ESPN. And then you got Oklahoma and TCU. Oklahoma's got to pull it together. TCU has, I think their quarterback is like the number 1 quarterback in college football QBR wise. And they're going against Oklahoma that's nicked up. And I mean, pretty bad. Late afternoon kicks, you got Wake and Florida State. This will determine who stays in the top 25, because I think the loser of that is definitely dropping out this week. You've got Northwestern and Penn State. I think that'll be a good one. Rutgers and Ohio State on the Big Ten Network. Obviously, you can tell if it's on the Big Ten Network, they really don't care about that game. You got Oklahoma. You got Oklahoma State and Baylor. That's 9 versus 16, so that's a ranked on ranked matchup. And then you got Alabama versus Arkansas. That one should be interesting because, Arkansas probably goes in there with a chip on their shoulder based off of last year's game. And I think Bama's primed for another, sneaky kind of upset because they're getting closer and closer to getting to losing. Moving on to the primetime games, though, you got NC State and Clemson. Like, they're talking about it big time out here in North Carolina, man. Like, everybody is high on NC State. I'm just not so sure about it. We'll see.
They're going to get murdered. I'm sorry, but Clemson had their bad game last week, and NC State's walking in there to get murdered.
I think this.
Daniel's pick there.
Yeah, I think Clemson may be back to form when they won the championship, or maybe that year where they got close and lost in the first round.
Oh, I don't think it's a blowout. I think NC State is a legitimate quality team, and they'll have a good here. But I think Clemson, like Daniel said, it's a big game. It's a rivalry game. They win by 10 points. It's a solid win.
Yeah, that's true.
Clemson covers the 6.5.
Yeah, that's fair. And then, of course, the big primetime matchup is going to be Georgia at Mizzou. And that's on the SEC network. So, again, that's another one like, hey, we're throwing that one out to the paywall or the people with the extended coverage because, like, they don't have any high hopes for Missouri. Dan, what games are you going to be watching this week?
Big one would be Wake at FSU, if it happens. Coach Clausen already said that he's not traveling to Florida in the middle of a hurricane. And honestly, who can blame the guy? But, Florida State ready to take that forfeit if it's on the table. Sportsmanship at college football, alive and well. And then on the other side, we talked about this, but it's a great week of group of 5 matchups. If you look at the lines on those Power 5 matchups, not a lot of them are 1-score lines. Whereas in the group of 5, there's a lot of close games projected. Army and Georgia State both need this win badly. Tulane and Houston, that's a barn burner every year. FAU at North Texas, Miami, Ohio at Buffalo, if you care about the MAC. Liberty at Old Dominion, 2 sneaky, really good teams in Virginia. And, you already touched on it. UTSA at MTSU, suddenly a little spicy. You got to be ready to go to the group of 5 this weekend, personally.
Joe, how about you?
I 100% agree. I was actually doing kind of a deep dive on that on my 2-hour drive back home. And I'm really excited to see UTSA against Middle Tennessee. And there's a couple betting experts that are saying take that over, and the over 73. Whoa! Forget about it. It's a lot. So I don't know enough to lay any money on it, but that should be a fun one to watch. But I agree that NC State and Clemson should be getting the same attention up here. Unfortunately, it is not. I lived in North Carolina for 10 years, so I know how huge the trash talk and how huge that game is. And there's a fan. Your neighbors could be fans of both either school, and it's a big deal down there. And I believe that NC State is legit. I don't think there's too overrated. I think they finished in the teens somewhere. And I think Clemson, like Daniel said, is going to hit their stride this weekend, but that's going to be a solid game if that one happens, because I hear that weather might project, whether that game actually happens or not. That's what they were saying today. I didn't know that was an issue.
Yeah, they're looking. They said Hurricane Ian is going to turn up the coast. So he's gonna hit the Panhandle and then start moving north along the East Coast. So that's South Carolina and North Carolina, and quite frankly, if it's a little rainy, cool. If it's hurricane still, that is not going to be fun because those usually tend to be super crappy. For me, like I said, I think the big one, we've already talked about it a couple times, MTSU and UTSA is going to be a great game to watch. I'll probably peek in on Northwestern and Penn State because I think that'll be a more competitive contest. They're at Penn State, so I mean advantage as Penn State, of course.
Yeah.
Just because Northwestern has not played well, but Northwestern likes to play spoiler, man. Like they do it every year. They'll drop one or two, and then out of nowhere, they'll pick off one of the better teams in the Big Ten. So I think that's one of the things that.
23.5.
If they could get that game in Ireland, then I would be a believer. But I'm not so sure if it's going to be at Penn State.
Yeah, that's true. Neutral field in Ireland, I guess. Of course, I think Bama and Arkansas is going to be one of the games to watch. I'm like, I put it in the notes, but I would definitely take the under on that one. I think both of those defenses are pretty stingy, and their offensive have not been producing. So if you're going to lay money down on that one, I would say, at least take the over, because the spread, I think the spread is like 20. I don't even think the spread's that much. I'll have to go back and look.
Yeah, 17.
Yeah, it's 17.
7-point game last year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it'll be a lot closer than that one. All right. Well, we kind of talked about what we're going to be watching, but let's actually, dive in and make some picks.
Weekly locks.
What do you think this week, Dan?
So I went 2-1 last week, and I have in the cruiserweight belt standings, I have started to claw my way back from 6 down. So that unfortunately is a lot of clawing back. I'm 11 games behind the leader, that's like, I wish we had a mountain stage. That's what I need to get back in the lead. But anyway, I'm taking UTSA -4 at Middle Tennessee State. I understand that Miami had a bad game, but I think people have lost their mind about Middle Tennessee a little bit. We'll see. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. And I'm also taking Air Force to cover -14, hosting the Mids. Like we already talked about that. That Mids offense is god awful. I don't know. We'll see what their defense is. It may be a low scoring game, and I might take the under, but
Daniel, what's the over under in that game? Do you know?
I do not know. While you are talking, though, I will look it up.
Further, I'll look it up.
Yeah. So for me, I went 1-1-1, which sucks because of the stupid freaking basically push that I had in that last game that I took. Right now, hey, take the over on Texas Tech and K-State. I think both of those offenses are firing pretty well. Adrian Martinez, like he got off the sinking ship early, so he left the Frost train before the Frost train happened. So he got out of there and went to K-State, and I don't know if you've watched him play or even the highlights, but that dude is showing out. Like he's making his case to play at the next level and probably in the postseason. Like if he wasn't at K-State, he'd probably be in the postseason because that guy was good enough to transfer just about anywhere and play. And I think he just stayed in the Midwest because it's close to home.
Looks like he found a home.
Yeah. I mean, he looked good. 5 touchdowns. Come on. That's pretty easy. Take Northwestern to cover 25.5. I think that game will be closer than that. I think Penn State is good, but I think Northwestern will sneakily get in there. And then the other game that I picked, I actually put it in the cruiserweight title this week. I said, take the under on Arkansas and Bama, but the game that I picked was Purdue, and I forget who they're playing. But bottom line is Purdue's going to go in there and start playing spoiler. Yeah, they're playing Minnesota. they're going to start playing Spoilermaker again this year. And this is about the time where they kicked in and they ran like that 7 or 8 straight. And I think this might be the time. And PJ Fleck always, I don't know why, but he always kind of gets hung up when he's playing against some of that not so great Big Ten competition. He always rises to the occasion as a coach and his team gets him ready. But when it's time for him to play one of those teams that they start looking past, I think it might bite him. And I'll pass it over to Joe. What are your thoughts?
Very keen observation on PJ Fleck. He does start off hot. It's like there's a tape on him. Comes in about week.
Yeah.
I love him as a coach. I love his energy. You guys awesome, but I agree with that. I got burned last week for doing it, and it's almost making. But I'm telling you, I went away from my gut on 3 picks. Daniel said, "Joe, what do you got? Ohio State, Wisconsin." I said, "Ohio State." Boom. Florida, Tennessee, pick that one. But anyways, I went away from all 3 of my picks when it came pick time, so I'm going with my gut here. Michigan, Iowa, under 42. All right, I can see Michigan winning that game 28-10, and that being a high-scoring game. Iowa's averaging 19 points and giving up 5. Okay, these are 2 crazy good defenses, and J.J. McCarthy has not really found his rhythm yet, and I think it's going to be a lot of running, a lot of defense. So I got the under in that game, Michigan, Iowa, under 42. I don't understand why Kentucky's getting 7 going to Ole Miss, but I'll take it. I like Kentucky plus 7. I love the NC State Clemson over. That game's at 40. So I'm taking that. If that game happens, the over-under is 40 points, gentlemen, with Clemson on the field. So I 21-20, and you hit that. So I'm taking the over because I think that game's actually, it's wind determines scoring, not as much as rain does. Rain actually produces a little more. So, and then I actually took the Bama, I took Arkansas plus 17 at home. I think they keep that game close. I think they stay within 2 scores. But it was a 7-point game last year. So I got Michigan, Iowa under 42, Kentucky plus 7, Arkansas plus 17, and then NC State Clemson over 40. So I'm either digging myself a hole or climbing out of it, one way or the other, boys.
Yeah, I legitimately think like that call for Arkansas and Bama. I think that's a smart call. I think that's a call that anybody would make because knowing how Bama has struggled, it's going to be, it's funny because it's like I saw a meme this week that somebody posted like they showed the score between Georgia and Kent State, and they were like, oh my gosh, like Georgia's just one of the best teams, and they're looking like the champion again. And then they were throwing the boo birds at the near misses that Bama has had. And it's like, well, what's the difference between those 2 teams? I'll tell you the difference between those 2 teams. Stetson Bennett, right? I mean, like we're waiting for Bryce Young to show up.
Yeah,
he hasn't
sure.
performed like he did last year. And, everybody was talking at the beginning of the season, back-to-back Heismans for him and blah, blah, blah. But like the reality of it is like, hey man, like CJ Stroud and Stetson Bennett are legit good. Like he is going to have to put up some monster numbers for the rest of the year. And I mean, monster numbers if he can.
And a dark horse, I'm going to screw his name up, so I'm not even going to try it. Quarterback at USC, once again, is being talked about after 3-4 weeks. We'll see, because last year, I think after 3 weeks, he was one of the, dark horses to win the Heisman. And I can't remember his name for the love of God. I'm not a Southern Cal fan, never will be. So, yeah, but I was sitting there looking at the stats. He's like number 2 or 3 in everything. It's like Stroud, and then you see his name, and he keeps popping up. So, bothering me, but I'm telling you that the quarterback for USC, they got actually a pretty good test this weekend.
Yeah, well, it's Caleb Williams, and the other part of it is all really Caleb has to do is hang out because all these guys are going to move on next year, and so if he can continue to perform and not get injured and hold his starting spot, he's going to be the guy next year. He's going to be the guy to beat.
Arizona State, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your number 1 passing efficiency quarterback is the guy from TCU at 216.03. And then right behind him is CJ Stroud. But the difference is 8 touchdowns and about 600 yards. So I mean, you're looking at a pretty stout competition, and that's the same thing with look at JJ McCarthy. JJ McCarthy is the number 3 quarterback in QBR this season. Problem is he's 600 yards behind CJ Stroud and 11 touchdowns. Again, it's about production when it gets to that point, because when you look at overall passing touchdowns, that's when it gets tight. So you've got Drake Maine, CJ Stroud with 16, Sam Hartman's got 13, Austin Reed from Western Kentucky. That guy's been a sleeper. Who's that kid? Don't know, but he obviously can throw because he's got 16 touchdowns this season. So again, I think quarterbacks, unfortunately quarterbacks get the most eyes, but there's a whole bunch of unsung heroes that are propping that dude up. But I think legitimately CJ Stroud has the best receiver core in college football, and whatever they're doing in that recruiting in that locker room and the wide receivers at Ohio State, like everybody else in college football needs to get some of that, particularly if you like forward pass and touchdowns, because those dudes are ridiculous. I mean, it's like
number 1 in their clubhouse as far as number 1 wideouts go.
Yeah, it's like
Marvin Harrison's the best wideout on the team.
Yeah, dudes. But the thing is, dudes are getting hurt, and he's like the number 2 guy, and he's the best receiver on the team. And yeah,
to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's just it's crazy how much talent it is. But like looking at Bryce Young, he's quietly got 1,000 yards passing and 13 touchdowns, but he's just not winning like these other guys are. So I think that's something to watch.
I hate to see it too. Kind of Ohio State that.
Yeah. Well,
I'm telling you, man, when they come in and they feel like they're nationally disrespected, they treat Michigan like they're the nation.
Well, that's a keen observation, my friend. But like I said, I think there's going to be some good matchups this weekend. I'd like to see, not to say that I want to see Alabama fall, but I think Arkansas is probably poised for that upset just because, they're nicked up. They've had some games that could have gone either way. And like, hey, look, let's get a little payback and let's get our names back into the national conversation, because when they were 9-0 last year, everybody was like, oh, these guys are it. We're going to see them playing against Georgia in the SEC championship. And we saw how that worked out. So here's a chance for them to kind of get a little bit of payback. But anybody got a favorite thing before we close this show out? Dan, how about you?
Just to circle back around real quick, Navy at Air Force over under 37.5. I think the real question is, do you think Air Force can score 30 points? Because I don't know that I believe Navy's going to put up more than 7.
Yeah, I think the highest output that Navy's had this season was 23 in an overtime game, which is god awful. I mean, like there's the prep school team at Army could put up more points than the Navy football team this year. But yeah, my favorite thing is, hey, look, Army's back on the slate again. They had a week off. I think they needed the bye, but they got a tough test against them with Georgia State. We covered that pretty deep on the other show, but like Georgia State and Army is going to be a good game. And again, that's a group, that's outside of the group of 5. But like Dan said earlier, the group of 5 games are probably a little bit more interesting this week than the Power 5 games. And you can tell based off of who's getting the primetime slots, because like a lot of the ranked teams are regulated to the respective networks of their televised games. So you've got, Georgia on the SEC network, Ohio State's on the Big Ten network. When they do that, there's like, oh, there's more interesting games that are out there. And it's kind of to their detriment, because, they're not getting the eyeballs on them, but really nobody wants to sit back and watch, Ohio State score like 60 points on somebody when there's probably a more compelling game or a more interesting contest.
It's like the decision to put Army behind the paywall. They do it because they know the fan base can afford to pay. I mean, that's, if, they're putting Army on the regional sports network against Wake Forest in 10 days because those are big contracts, those regional sports network contracts. Like those channels are struggling to survive. But anyway, yeah, that's it.
All right. So again, I'm Rob the Angry Colonel with Trigger Joe and Dano E. Cabeza covering down for your college football roundtable. Dan's got the strap. I don't know if he's going to be able to hold on to that thing for the rest of the year. He's going to
coming back, baby.
You're going to have to pick like 10 games a week and get 7 of them right, because it's looking pretty rough. But as always, we thank you guys for checking us out, and we will catch you guys on the flip side. Thanks.
Beat Georgia State.
Beat them. Thanks for listening to the As for Football College Football Roundtable. Please join us again soon for another episode of the College Football Roundtable, and be on the lookout for the next Army football show. Please continue to follow us on all social media platforms at As for Football. We thank you for your continued support of As for Football, the Black Knights football team, and Army athletics. And as always, beat Navy.